Ladies and gentlemen, you are now watching and listening to Real Talk with Ronnie, with your host, Ronald Lynn. All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Real Talk with Ronnie. I'm Ronald Lynn, your host. Very happy to be with you all again today. Now, my guest for tonight is a very special guest. He's been on our show before. I want to say it's been like a year now, right? Time does fly. His name is Rik Mehta. Rik Mehta, as we all know, was the 2020 U.S. Senate candidate here in Jersey. And actually, I think he broke all records. I think that record still stands. I think he is currently and still the highest Republican vote getter in the entire state of New Jersey. I think that's a record that still stands. When Rik comes on, we'll confirm. But aside from that, Rik, he's a little bit busy, right? He's a pharmacist. He's an attorney. He is an entrepreneur, okay? And we're very happy to have him on our show today to have a little catch-up, to get his thoughts on the current political climate, what he's been up to, and what's in store for Rik Mehta in the future. Rik, how are you, buddy?
Hey, good, Ronnie. Thanks so much for having me back on.
Sure. It's been a minute, right? I think the last time you were on my show was I think it was 2021, right? So it's been almost like 2 years, I think, right?
So much has transpired. I don't remember, but I certainly remember it's been a minute or two since we've spoken. So yeah, that's right.
And about that record that I mentioned, you currently still hold that record for being the highest Republican vote getter in the state of Jersey, right?
I do. It's, despite all the odds that we faced during 2020 election with COVID and the governor changing the way we vote and impinging on our constitutional rights and taking away our freedoms, making everything vote by mail, changing things at the last minute, despite all of that, I am proud, and of course, a lot of credit goes to my team for breaking a 48-year-old record of receiving the highest votes, and not just by a slim margin, by sizably beating that record by over, I think, some 500,000 votes. So yes, very proud of that, and I'd like to say it's going to be another 50 years until that record is broken again.
Let's hope so. Or maybe in a couple more years, if you do decide to run for office, right? Who knows? If you broke your own record, that's something even better, right?
That's right. Sure. Absolutely.
Now, that record stands at what, like 1.7 million votes?
Yeah. 1.7. I think it ended up being 1.8, some number of votes. Again, not enough to pull it through to beat, Cory Booker. But again, with all the fraught voting, really, they literally created a super voting center for mail-in ballots right in Newark, and not in any of the other, Republican-leaning districts. So, we had already had the odds stacked up against us. But yes, hit 1.8 million votes, and a sizable amount than the 2021 election and the 2022 elections as well.
Okay. All right. So that was 2020 when you ran for U.S. Senate. You last came on our show in 21. So right now it's 2023, right? A lot has happened since. So Rik, why don't you give us a little update on what you've been up to?
Absolutely. So, my background, Ronnie, I've always stayed busy and, really my story, how it started when my father immigrated here. And, we've always worked hard to achieve everything that we have. And so in my personal and my professional career, I started as a pharmacist and then went to law school and worked at the FDA. And since leaving the FDA, working in the private sector, I've also had an entrepreneurial bug and been, investor in companies. And in fact, I've started 2 of my own companies, which I'm very proud of. And in the professional sector, have been working to really build those up. We've really hit 2 very nice niches in terms of like industry disruption. One company called Licentium, we are a health tech company that's focused on disrupting the very broken regulatory systems behind provider and medical licensing. And I'll tell you, Ronnie, just to talk about that for a minute, it's quite remarkable, not just my startup, but what's going on in the industry. Right now with COVID, we've seen a massive push of, both government policies and people in the way the practice of medicine is carried out to push for more in-person visits to virtual care, right? The entire Center for Medicaid Medicare changed their reimbursement policy, and they've been pushing more people to see doctors through video cameras like we're doing right now than to go and see doctors in person. And so what doctors have done, as entrepreneurial as they are, they've engaged in the practice of telehealth and telemedicine, virtual care. And so if you are a doctor in New Jersey and you want to see a patient across state lines in California, for example, you have to be licensed in the state that a patient sits in. And so what my company has sought to do is to break down the barriers for doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals that need to obtain multiple licenses in order to see patients across state lines. I mean, think about it. If you were driving and you had to obtain a driver's license in every state you drove through, that's exactly what's happening with the practice of medicine. I mean, it's government bureaucracy on steroids, but my company has sought to rationalize a broken regulatory system and also to help free up doctors' time so they can see patients instead of patient paperwork. So that's what we've been busy on that company's side.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine, right? If you had to obtain a new driver's license for every state that you travel through, it would be a nightmare for like interstate commerce, right?
Well, especially if you live in New Jersey, where the
Right.
Motor Vehicle Commission is a nightmare to go. You wait in line for a couple hours. It takes doctors anywhere from 5 to 7 hours to obtain a new license. And so, more than that, they have to renew their license every year, following new regulatory
Mhm.
requirements. Some states require certain sensitivity training for LGBTQ, opioid abuse, now vaccinations. And so the medical boards use continuing education as a means to focus doctors on certain areas where their policies lie. And so it's very hard for them to keep up. Now, I'll tell you this other statistic, and this is important in public health right now. What's going on is that more than 50% of doctors are burned out of their job. Burned out. They're tired of it. And the number one reason that's cited, and these are again, are government resources and studies that have been commissioned looking at physician burnout. The number one reason is because of paperwork burden. Paperwork burden. Doctors are tired of staring at computer screens and filling out electronic health records. They're tired of credentialing and recredentialing their credentials with health systems, obtaining multiple medical licenses. I mean, it is a bureaucratic nightmare for them. They just want to see patients, do what they were trained in medical school. And this is the reason why they're getting burned out at their jobs. Now, imagine now you're a patient, right? You go in, the last thing you're thinking of is that the doctor you're about to see is burned out of her job. It's a scary thought. And, this has become exacerbated after the Affordable Care Act. Surprisingly, President Biden was just touting the anniversary of the Affordable Care Act, not once mentioning the entire burden it's created on our providers. And so, our company really seeks to try to alleviate a lot of the pressure points in terms of paperwork burden and redundancies towards addressing a massive physician burnout issue going on in our country.
Mm-hmm. Well, that certainly does sound like a big project, right? Um, in your estimation, I mean, given the fact that you're a professional in the medical field, do you feel like a lot of doctors are moving more towards this televisit sort of setup, or do you think doctors like to see patients in person?
That's a great question. I think it depends on the type of provider and the type of practice they want. I'll tell you, telehealth does give doctors more flexibility to have control over their schedules.
Mhm.
It's a gig economy, and it's still a gig economy, right? And we have clients that, will be 1099 contractors, work for themselves, partner with multiple telemedicine outlets, and then fill up their schedule seeing patients on their behalf. And it's a great way to earn income, a great way to earn additional income for providers. But more importantly, we see that the expansion of telehealth allows for physicians to enter into homes of patients that otherwise would not necessarily have access to care in rural areas and even in urban settings where you have physician shortages. This allows for a greater accessibility and access to provider care. Now, in terms of providers themselves, again, some old school physicians may feel like in person's better, and there's some medical practices where you have to be in person in certain procedures. In fact, Ronnie, we saw that during COVID when Governor Murphy shut everything down, including office visits for patients. We're still reeling from the repercussions of not having follow-up visits or delayed physician or medical intervention. People have suffered and public health has suffered under the policies that were set in order to tackle COVID.
Right. I can see how like a dentist would actually literally need to see you in person, right? But
Yeah, right.
but I guess if you're in the psychotherapy sort of field, right, that's something that's easily done through a televisits, because I don't really think there's a huge difference in laying on a couch and talking about your problems or sitting in the front of a computer screen, right?
Yeah, look, to each their own, right? I mean, I think the advent and innovation is tremendous in order to allow flexibilities. A quick dad joke for you. What do they call optometrists that practice telemedicine?
I don't know what.
Television.
Oh,
Ah,
that's great.
you know, sorry, I had to. Being a dad of three boys, I
Now,
gotta keep
when you
keep
told that
that
joke
down.
to your boys, which I'm sure you obviously did, did they laugh?
Oh, of course not. It's, oh, dad, come on, stop. That's so stupid. The usual. But
Right.
I think deep down they love it.
Oh yeah,
That's
yeah.
what I tell myself.
I mean, they don't want to boost your ego too much, right? So they're
That's right.
so
Yeah.
they're just trying to play it down,
Yeah, that's right. They keep me at baseline.
right?
I
So
know my role in my house. Yeah.
so let's talk about your other startup, Lactiga, right?
That's it. You got it. Lactiga.
Okay.
That's right.
And I've thrown up the
Yeah.
website here. So what does Lactiga do?
Yeah, again, this is so I'm really excited about this one. We started a biotech company, and when I say we, my co-founder and I, Dr. Viraj Mane, he's our chief scientist and expert in immunology. He was a postdoc fellow at the NIH many years ago. We both worked together and crossed paths at the FDA. And we actually became parents around the same time. And so what we found, and him having sort of his nerdy lens on his nerdy eyes towards this, is that our freezers were getting chock full of human milk, breast milk. Our freezers were getting full of breast milk, and he looked at it and said, these milk pouches, much of which were being wasted, are chock full of antibodies. Could we not repurpose the antibodies that are in this milk? And so he called me up, and I said, listen, a very similar pathway was taken about 60 years ago with human plasma, and now it's one of the cornerstone therapies FDA approved to treat immunodeficient patients. I said, mucosal immunity of the mucosa, opposed to humoral immunity, is a very overlooked immunological system, and there isn't much innovation, if actually arguably none. And so we started to do research many years. I mean, it's been about 6 or 7 years in the making. And what we've done is we've patented the first process to extract antibodies, namely what we call IgA, immunoglobulin A. Hence the name LACT, L-A-C-T, meaning milk,
Right.
like lactate or
Yeah.
lactose, and IgA. So IgA from human milk, we found, has tremendous amount of stability in the mucosal layers. So to really dumb this down a little bit, because even for myself, being a pharmacist, it makes it a little bit easier to more digestible to understand what we're doing. Uh, COVID COVID is actually an infection of the mucosa, right? That's why when COVID first hit, many people lost their sense of smell, their sense of taste. In fact, some people still probably don't quite have it back yet. And yet, our approach to treatment was highly focused on vaccination and humoral immunity, meaning getting antibodies or antibiotics or other interventions into the bloodstream and to affect the entire body rather than into the mucosal layer, which coats your organs and your respiratory airway tract and your nasal cavities. So, what we're doing is we're developing antibodies for nasal delivery in order to stop pathogenic replication and to neutralize pathogens, specifically in immunodeficient patients, namely those that cannot produce their own antibodies. And we're doing some non-clinical early stage research. We've had some tremendous positive study outcomes, partnering with the Center for Drug Discovery at Hackensack Institute. We're working with collaborators at Mount Sinai. University of Georgia, Rutgers University. We have a great consortium of academic collaborators and experts also in the field coming together. Our office being at the Bioscience Center in North Brunswick, we have some very exciting research and publications coming down the pike. But I'll tell you, right now, while a lot of people are looking to leave the state and get out of Jersey, still arguably nothing beats the Jersey corridor when it comes to innovation in the biotech space. And we're very proud of being a Jersey-based company here.
Wow, that sounds really, really fascinating. And I think that's a really smart way to kind of deal with all the excess breast milk, right? Because I know that my wife, so I have two little boys too. My oldest one is almost 3.
Yeah.
My younger one is almost 1.5, right? So in our freezer, we actually do still have a lot of those pouches full of frozen milk, frozen breast milk, just kind of sitting there, right? And I've been wondering, what am I going to do with those? Now I know I can ship them to Rik Mehta, right?
That's right. Now, I'm not going to give out my address for that. My wife will kill me.
Right.
But yes, and actually, just to comment on that, there's two things, and this goes out to anyone who's listening that has milk. Listen, there are actually nonprofit human milk banks, and I got to give a shout out to the women and men that work in these institutions because they do tremendous work. So, human milk donations, it's just like you have blood banks where you donate blood. They have human milk banks where you can donate milk. And this milk is then repurposed, pasteurized, and sent to neonatal intensive care units because human milk in its whole form is oftentimes used in NICUs around hospitals in order to prevent infant mortality outcomes such as necrotizing enterocolitis. And again, not to get too technical, but there are therapeutic value to human milk. And these nonprofit human milk banks do tremendous work in getting that out there. So for those that have extra milk, please reach out to your nearest human milk bank and talk to them about donating milk. We've built one of the first bioethical supply chains with some of the donor institutions where we are able to bioethically source human milk that doesn't take away from the neonatal babies that actually need it, but it allows us to source milk that wouldn't qualify for these infants and these preemie babies. And so we've really established a socially conscious bioethical framework with the human milk banks, and they are tremendous partners. So that's my quick plug to those that are out there that don't know. Look into human milk banks. If you have extra milk, reach out to them and please work with them to donate.
Great, awesome. Now, Lactiga and the mission purpose for your company, right? When it comes to this milk, is this a unique idea that Lactiga is trying to pursue?
Yeah, so mucosal immunity has been well established, and more studies and academic publications are coming out about the value of targeting therapeutics towards fortifying our mucosal immunity. To date, we have not had any FDA approved therapeutics that target mucosal immunity in its whole, primarily because immunoglobulins lack stability in the harsh mucosal environment. We're the first company to develop a therapeutic with promising non-clinical data that supports the value of our antibodies having stability and retention in the mucosal system. And we're the only company that's patented this process as well. And so, we're very fortunate to really build out our idea and sort of be a unicorn in the space for reinventing what we know and being a pioneer in mucosal immunity. There's one other thing I want to mention, and just to get back to COVID, since COVID is a mucosal infection, many of our policies around the time, and I was very vocal against it too, were really established around vaccination. Now, vaccination as an innovation serves its own role in sort of the armamentarium of treatment options or, interventions when it comes to viruses, undoubtedly. That being said, there was also this push by government wonks to downplay natural immunity. This was a mistake. In fact, the antibodies that we extract and purify that we're developing into therapeutic are naturally occurring antibodies. That's what they are. They're polyclonal. And so our own body reacts to the viral particles and pathogens that you're exposed to and forms our own antibodies that are nicely comport to neutralizing the mutations of different pathogens. And we know COVID is a highly mutating virus, right? And it's impossible for vaccines and monoclonal antibodies and others to keep up with those mutations. That's why you see so many monoclonals being plucked off the market, saying that they're no longer effective. That's why you see vaccines being about like three different variants behind the curve in terms of what the current mutation strains are that are on the market. Polyclonal antibodies gives a unique perspective to be able to address to the evolving mutations of viruses through natural immunity. And again, I hope there's going to be a renewed interest by hopefully a better public health institution, rebuilding our integrity of our public health institutions and the NIH, certainly refocusing on natural immunity and its role in therapeutics and fighting, some of these opportunistic pathogens.
Right. Now, speaking of COVID, what are your thoughts on the future of COVID? Do you think it's pretty much done, or do you think it might rear its ugly head again in some sort of new strain that infects the world again, and then more shutdowns? Or do you think, by and large, we're pretty much through it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't have any crystal ball, but I think I've been on the position for at least over a year and a half that we've already been done with COVID,
Mhm.
right? At this point, everyone's been exposed to it. The ones that you have to worry about are stratified, cohorts of populations, that those that have comorbidities, elderly, that have a higher risk category, right? Those that have a higher or a worser outcome from contracting COVID. But at this point, with the development of therapeutics, again, people being exposed to it, developing natural antibodies, I think, we're going to have COVID. I think that's going to be here to stay. We're never going to have this herd immunity around it. But certainly, I don't think the same, risk level has been there for at least over a year and a half plus. If we measure it based on case fatality rates, we're well over the curve on that. In fact, even the most, left wing institutions that took a very, you know, stark approach to COVID have even loosened their strictures around our policy response on it.
Okay. All right. Well, Rik, so we've talked about your personal and your entrepreneurial life, right? We've talked about COVID. Now let's shift the conversation back to where we first started, politics, right? So right now it's 2023, and as you know, in New Jersey, there's an election every single year. This year,
Yeah.
2023, the entire state legislature is up for re-election, right? There's been some chatter that the NJGOP is optimistic that perhaps this year the GOP can gain a majority. I think that's still a little bit of a wishful thinking, right? But maybe, right? Maybe. What are your thoughts on this year's race?
Yeah, listen, this is, I think, arguably a great year for the Republican Party to make grounds. Primarily because, I think people are frustrated at the economy. And at the end of the day, they may not be paying attention, the general population may not be paying attention to the nuanced political issues du jour. But what they do know is that, like the other day, I went to the diner and I ordered one single egg. It was $5, right? They do know those things that hit their pocketbook. They know how difficult New Jersey has been to raise their family. They're arguably concerned about the school districts and the indoctrination policies and the sex ed curriculum that's being pushed in health class and starting to spill over into the Common Core curriculum that's been pushed out by a very progressive, out of touch governor's administration. And so, given the concerns that the everyday family in New Jersey has, I do think I am optimistic as well, like the NJGOP, that we're going to make grounds. That being said, we have to be, not just glass is half full or glass is half empty, but the fact that we have water in the glass. We have to be pragmatists. We have to be realists, which means that those candidates that are out there have to campaign their butts off, right? They got to go touch every knock on every door, touch every family, and get people encouraged. Without a strong top of the ticket race, this is not a presidential year. This is not a gubernatorial election year. People are not paying attention. And so the ones that are more likely to vote are the ones that are either frustrated or the ones that commonly vote. And we know that in New Jersey, Democrats outnumber Republicans at least a million by over a million registered voters, right? Now, Jack did a good job of making grounds in New Jersey in narrowing that gap, but let's not hang our hats on those laurels. We have to be realistic that Democrats are also paying attention to what they were basically sleeping at the wheel. They're gonna be pushing back hard against another Steve Sweeney versus Ed Durr situation, right? And you better believe it. I've seen it myself in Central Jersey, in Woodbridge, in Middlesex. I mean, areas in Essex County where Democrats have a strong hold, a strong majority, where Republicans have been extremely weak and have let the Democrats continue to slip away. Those are the areas where we have to, as a base, continue to push why our policies work better for the everyday New Jerseyans. And if they don't understand that, if we only get caught up in our own rhetoric, if we let national talking points govern the way we campaign, we're not going to make those grounds. And I would like to see a more active NJGOP. And I know it's a lot of hard work. A lot of volunteer hours go into it. But what I haven't seen is this touchback to the grassroots and making a meaningful progression towards tying back conservative grassroots with more establishment-based Republicans, finding common ground, bridging the two into one cohesive party, and then directing our efforts against those targeted districts. Listen, I am hopeful. But like I said, Ronnie, it's not a glass half full. It's not a glass half empty. We have water in the glass, and now we have to go out and make voters drink it.
So overall, are you happy or dissatisfied with what the NJGOP is doing, or do you think there's still work to be done?
Well, there's always work to be done. And again, it's not so much satisfied or dissatisfied. It's that we have to make more grounds and make more winning for. Look, first of all, congratulations to my friend Tom Kean. He flipped a district. It was a hard fought race. And now we have a third Republican representing us in Congress. That was great. But if you look at the rest of the state, we took some really hard hits to the face, right? 2022 was arguably supposed to be the year where Republicans made ground, and we didn't. We blew it. Now, a lot of that was governed by national politics, but where has New Jersey and the NJGOP carved out an exception in order to make sure that we, establish those grounds? Listen, 2023 is very different. These are local races. These are local issues. And those that are paying attention are going to be New Jerseyans that are affected. And it's really still going to continue to be a referendum on how Governor Murphy has been performing. Now, I could sit here and say, well, I'm dissatisfied with what Governor Murphy did. But is that the average statistic across the state? And I'd say probably not. I think in general, New Jerseyans are okay with how Governor Murphy has performed. And so Republicans really need to reach out to those voters and do it now. I am optimistic. Again, I do think that we can make grounds, but it's not going to be short of a lot of hard work, a lot of effort, and a really strong mobilization of our grassroots contingency, which I don't think has been really meaningfully cultivated quite yet.
Now, if you had to make a prediction, would you say that the Republicans gained the majority in the legislature this year?
Well, Ronnie, again, I think that's a tough call. I'm gonna, as a steward of the Republican Party, I will say yes. I think Republicans. I think now is the time is now ripe. It's too early to pull out a crystal ball and prognosticate. But yes, I think that all the pieces are in place for a strong Republican victory in November of 23.
But Rik, this is my thinking, right? I think many people think the same way, that last year, 2022, was the Republicans' best chance to make gains, right? Last year, all the frustration that people had throughout the nation was at a fever high pitch, right? With the curriculum and the schools, to the vaccines, to the mandates, to the businesses shutting, to inflation, to high costs of living, to everything, right? Yet Republicans could not win by the margins that they thought they would win by, right? So why would this year be any better than last year when I absolutely think that last year was the best possible type of year?
Yeah, no, listen, Ronnie, it's a fair question, right? And again, I'm not I'm not the political strategist on this. What I can tell you from my own experience running statewide is that New Jersey truly care about what's happening in New Jersey, right? Where the carve out from the country, and a lot of last year, 2022, was focused at the federal level, right? It was a referendum against Nancy Pelosi's failed policies, a referendum against Joe Biden and this progressive branch, the Squad of Four, and others that were ruining. What we saw as a precursor to ruining the economy, we saw that foreshadowing held true, and the economy has tanked. Now, what we have the opportunity to do is look at what's happening in the state of New Jersey. 2023 is all about local races, right? Are people happy with their mayor? Are they happy with their assembly? Are they happy with their state senators? Are they getting the right representation? And what are the things that tie back to the average New Jerseyan? How much are they paying at the pump? How much are groceries costing? How much are their taxes? What is their regulatory burden? How much of their small business has been affected and shut down, and what has the governor done? Now, again, I don't think the governor has gotten completely bad marks. That's not my personal opinion. I'm just talking objectively. So it's going to depend on that particular district. And again, I think there's certain targeted districts that I think if we have the right momentum, we have the right grassroots approach, we get the right talking points, and if we can actually accelerate our voice and make it louder than what's happening at the national stage and truly focus on New Jersey, we can make those grounds. Remember, last year was about national politics. We have to paint 23 as the year of state politics. I have not seen that happen both on the Republican or the Democrat side, but arguably because we're the underdog, meaning the Republican Party is the underdog, we got to be the loudest voice out there. And I sure hope there's a plan in place to turn the corner, to get those talking points to hit home directly to New Jerseyan voters. I think there is. I'm optimistic. I think there is, but it's not going to be any short of any effort. And again, I will tell you right now, if we don't mobilize the grassroots base, we are not going to win. We are not going to win. And I haven't seen that done meaningfully yet.
Okay. Well, and the NJGOP has around right now it's March 23rd as of the taping of this show. So around 5-6 months to kind of get their act together, right?
Well, and listen, it's all of our acts, right? I'm in this with them, right? Whether it's the NJGOP or an establishment or a grassroots or whatever faction of the Republican Party you belong to, I don't care. My only goal is to win. And I'll tell you right now, and if there's any candidates watching, reach out. If they need help, reach out. We all have to work collectively, especially for those swing districts. We got to work together. We have to mobilize whatever resources we have available. I'm going to be out there helping candidates, up and down the states within whatever capacity I have. And whatever I can do, I would expect the same of whatever any other person that believes in our cause for fixing New Jersey, making New Jersey the best place to live, not leave. If you're proud of New Jersey and you want to see the state return to its glory days for any creed, race, religion, or whatever your background is, if you truly believe in New Jerseyans' value, you believe in family values, then join your candidates on the campaign trail to win back our state. I think we can do it.
Okay. Now, 23 is this year, next year is 24, right? And part of the reason I think that 23 is kind of overshadowed is because next year is 24, right? A big presidential year. Any thoughts on next year? Who you think will ultimately prevail in the nomination process for both sides, and who will ultimately win the presidency?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's all still starting to shape up. Right now, President Trump, he's the former president, right? He's the torchbearer for the party. Polling wise, he still holds the strongest numbers, and of course, President Trump is polarizing. People love him, people hate him, whatever the case may be. He has a record to stand on, right? The 4 years he was president, we were in no wars. Russia was not aggressive to Ukraine. China was kept at bay. He walked into North Korea. North Korea was not outsizing their army, threatening democracy. Venezuela was not, creeping up with, other dictatorial activities. We had we were controlling the influx of illegal migration at the southern border. We were controlling fentanyl, right? We right now under President Biden, we have the highest number of deaths in the history of any presidential administration due to opioids. And not from legal supply chain of opioids, but illegal supply chain of opioids, which are predominantly coming into our ports and southern borders. And so that record, I think, is going to speak volumes to the American public, right? I think the American public is arguably sick and tired of the polarized politics. I was at my barbershop earlier today, and I love this. He said, red versus blue is like, it's like gang wars. Crips versus Bloods, and the American public is tired of it. If you think the minority communities are unaware, they're not. They're very aware. They know the country's become polarized. They just want someone who will represent their interests, fix the economy, and allow them to gain opportunities for their families, and set that precedence so that future generations can continue to have opportunities. So America is the greatest country in the world. And we're not right now. So, I think that's going to be a hard look. And I think that President Trump, based on his record, being the current torchbearer for the party, probably has the likely probability of success through the party. And I would say that 24 will be the Republican year, regardless of whoever wins the nomination.
Okay. So Ron DeSantis, do you think he ultimately loses the primary and will just gracefully bow out and back Trump? Or do you think actually Trump picks Ron DeSantis to be his VP?
Well, it almost feels like those candidates that are coming into the race are dress rehearsing for the VP role, right? Like I see Nikki Haley as someone who could be an incredible vice president. She has so much talent, so much intelligence when it comes to policy, so many accomplishments. And her story, look, arguably it's like my story. And we have very similar upbringings as being products of legal immigrants.
I will say this, Rik. I think that you are a bona fide superstar in India. I don't know if I could say that like about Nikki Haley, right?
Well, that's true. That's true, right? But as Americans, both of us have that story about living and making the American dream. And she's a role model to so many, both women and men, girls and boys, children all across the country. Is she presidential? Probably not yet, right? Could she learn a lot from President Trump? Absolutely. Ron DeSantis is another person that I admire tremendously. I mean, I am so impressed by what he's done, in the state of Florida, how he's turned over the state, how he's made it a beacon for so many people to flock to Florida to really live in a better means without government intrusion. The way he stood up to some of the public health policies. I mean, it took a lot of courage to go against the grain, against some very strong voices and bureaucrats at the time, like Dr. Fauci, Walensky, and others, to stand up against them, to really read the scientific data and make decisions against masking, mandatory vaccinations, and still have a stronger public health response. He's someone to watch for, right? Again, just objectively, could he beat President Trump in a primary? I would hate to see that head-to-head competition, only because I do see Governor DeSantis as a future president of our country. And I hope the infighting doesn't, stop the momentum that he could potentially gain. I don't think it will. I think he's just super strong of a candidate himself, but I do see him as a future president, just not in 24.
Okay. Now, speaking of Trump, this week there was rumors that Trump was going to get an indictment, right, and arrested. As of today, it's March 23rd. News just came out that the grand jury will be postponed until next week, right? Now, as a lawyer, do you see that the case by the New York DA, does this case have any legs?
Honestly, Ronnie, this is like daytime soap opera. This is like one of the dumbest things I've seen in such a long time. But more than dumb, it's a blatant abuse and misuse of taxpayer money to convene a grand jury to investigate something that's tenuous at best, with circumstantial evidence, with really no evidence of showing any participation by the I'm sorry, by the campaign, Trump's
Right.
campaign, or President Trump himself in this payoff of Stormy Daniels, that was then sought to be some illegal campaign contribution. Really, I mean, from the evidence we've seen publicly, right, that they've presented, there really is no teeth behind this, notwithstanding that the FEC called off this investigation of really is the right agency to be investigating this. How a local DA interjected himself, it just seems more like a dress rehearsal for Alvin Bragg to, really, rehearse for something bigger. Maybe he's gunning to be the next U.S. attorney. I don't really know, but it's a complete waste of time. You know, arguably, what has happened though is a reignitement of Trump's base, right? It's a misuse, and this cuts across so many genres. This doesn't just cut across like sort of the hardcore right, make America again great again contingency faction of the Trump base, but it also cuts into Democrats who hate the over abuse of law enforcement, as well, who are also saying, again, look at this, another great example of how law enforcement is abusing their powers to investigate a nothing burger. Again, when you see a massive spike in major crimes, 25%, you go in and now you have to fear being in New York City of being carjacked. Rape, assault, robbery, larceny. I mean, it's gone up over 25% because they're not meaningfully prosecuting actual crimes as they're being committed, and when they have strong evidence. And so something that happened 7 years ago, where the actual facts of the incident happened, I think in 2006, again, daytime soap opera.
Right. So do you think ultimately an indictment will be handed down or no?
No, no, I think, look, my prediction, and I've been known to be wrong, I think they're going to walk this back. I think this is a political play, and I think it's backfiring. And I think they see that Trump's poll numbers are rising because of it, and he's going to walk out of this unscathed. And it's going to, in essence, it's going to have the opposite effect of what they intended. And so, no, I don't. We'll see what happens, but I don't think there's enough evidence. Now, that being said, you can have, the old saying goes that a grand jury would indict a ham sandwich, right? So
True.
it wouldn't take much for a grand jury to actually indict the president. Will it actually hold legs? Will it have teeth? Is this a true infringement on a political campaign? This is a very loaded investigation that Alvin Bragg is carrying off. Really, and again, it's really fracturing our country even more. And at a time where we really need to build our parties together and look for common ground, Alvin Bragg is having the opposite effect right now. And really, what is he discouraging? Right? Prosecutions are meant to discourage future criminal activity. What exactly is he discouraging? So I don't understand the policy behind it, but yes, I think they're going to end up walking it back and burying this and walking away from it. That's my feeling.
Well, Alvin Bragg, I think what he was intending to discourage was another Trump presidential run. But I think after seeing that this is actually going to help Trump, and I think Elon Musk, he tweeted that if they indict Trump, if he's arrested, it will almost guarantee that he wins in 2024. So I think after seeing this, Democrats are having a little bit of cold feet. What about, okay, so 24 is next year. I'm gonna go 1 year past that. 2025 in New Jersey, there's a governor's race right now. There's a little bit of tension brewing between the Jack Ciattarelli, faction, and perhaps the Bill Spadea faction, right, and others. How do you see that playing out?
Well, look, good question, right? We have to see what the field is actually going to look like. Right now, Jack Ciattarelli is the only candidate to announce, and much like he did during my election in 2020, he announced for his gubernatorial election well in advance. The one thing that everyone has to be careful about is that your announcement for running for an elected office that's happening 2 years from now can't take away from the local offices and the local races that are going on right now. I think that's unwise for any candidate, right? And so jumping in early, I mean, now Jack's been out there campaigning. Bill Spadey is not an announced candidate yet. Does he have the right policies? I got to tell you, he's a man to look out for, right? He's a man who has ideas. He's got strong policy. He understands New Jersey. He's building a tremendous base with common sense. I've been a contributor. I like it. I think his voice on air has really been serving the public well. Does he come to odds with many elected officials all the time, right? But that's what intelligent debate is meant to be. It's about the ability to express opinion, whether and be able to take contrarian viewpoints, even when it's goes against the grain of what you believe in, to have healthy dialogue and discussion and debate in order to move the state forward. And I think both guys are very passionate about where they speak. So we'll see how it shapes out. Hard to comment right now because again, we only have one candidate that's announced for governor.
Right. Very true. All right. Now let's shift the focus back on you, Rik. Do you have any desire to seek public office in the future again?
Well, Ronnie, as it goes, and you know this better than most as being a candidate yourself, once the political bug bites you, it's hard to be unbitten. So, I'll say this, running for office is strenuous work. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of phone calls. You got to really dedicate that time. Right now, I'm focused on three very important things. Number one, my family. My wife and kids, after my 2020 run, I had to reintroduce myself because I spent so much time on the road. I didn't have enough time with them. They're first right now. Number two, we have two emerging businesses, both, raising funds, growing jobs right here in New Jersey. We're very proud of the number of jobs we've created with these businesses that I founded. And we're going to continue to grow our footprint here in New Jersey and well into both the biotech and the health tech sectors, arguably some of the most important industries here in New Jersey. And number three, politically, the 23 race and local candidates come first. I'm going to be out there and really, when things start to shape up, hosting fundraisers, meet and greets and events, and going out there to help build candidates' profiles, in whatever best capacity I can do. I think that's critical to the success for the future of our state. So well, stay tuned, Ronnie. Again, my political career just got started. But right now, I'm only focused on 23 candidates and trying to win back a majority in Trenton.
Okay. Well, just to pry a little bit further, next
Sure.
year there's also a U.S. Senate race, right?
Yes.
Menendez is up for re-election. Is that a race you're kind of looking into to maybe perhaps maybe jump into or kind of test the waters?
Well, let's see how the 23 election plays out. The truth is that Menendez has got to go. Listen, I thought, Bob Hugin, ran a credible race, came within 11 points. But until we make rounds statewide in really swing districts, it's going to be hard for any candidate to win statewide again, right? You can say Jack came close, but coming close is not a win, and we need a win. And so what we have to do in order to get that win, the Republican Party has to rebuild their base across the state. We don't need to be the majority number of registered voters in the state. What we need to do is appeal to the highest registered base of voters, which are independents. And if we can find common ground, we can win statewide. But I haven't seen yet that infrastructure built. And so either we work to build it or we get out there and build it ourselves. And so that's what I'm going to be mostly focused on. So it's too early to determine on anything on 24, 25. And well, I will say this for 26, listen, I'm not done with Cory Booker quite yet. Does that mean I'll run against him or not? I'm not sure, but I could see that his time in Senate is probably ticking away too. He's got aspirations for higher office, I'm sure. So let's see where that lands.
Okay.
But again, right now my eyes are on 23, and we'll see how that shapes up statewide first.
Well, 26 is although it's 3 years away, that can happen very, very quickly, right?
It could. Where is Corey? Right? Has anyone seen him back in Jersey? So you know,
Well, last I
um,
checked, he was running for president back in 2020, right?
that's right. That's right. So we'll see where his future aspirations will lead him. It'll be outside. You know, his roads are set outside of Jersey. So you know, he raised more money in California than he did in New Jersey. So that I think speaks volumes.
Right. Well, speaking of the Senate race next year, I think there's a few Republican candidates who have declared. Right. One of them is Shirley Maya Cusick, who's actually been on this show. She's an attorney, I want to say, out in Short Hills. The other is Dan Cruz. Right. He's a public school teacher, and I think those are the currently two candidates that have announced that they are running. Do you have any thoughts on either of those two?
You know, I've never met either of them, and I don't know either of them, so I really don't have thoughts. I know also Assemblywoman Beth Sawyer's name has been tossed
Right.
around. I do know her. I like her. I think she's sharp and has a very bright future ahead of her. I know she had some tension with Senator Durr, but you know she has a bright political career ahead of her. So I don't really have too many comments, just because I don't know them. Which again, you know, if they want to win, they better get out there and start to get to know
Right.
Republicans for sure.
Well, speaking of Beth Sawyer, right? That in itself is a whole nother political, drama, right? It's like a soap opera there. So, where do you see her going? Do you think she tries to realign with Ed Durr, make peace, join the ticket, or do you think she continues her run off the line? Do you think she drops out, runs for U.S. Senate?
Yeah, you know, all great questions. I don't know the intricate details of the issues. I can only speak objectively as a Republican who wants to create common ground among the party. I would love to see rapprochement with her and Ed Durr and realign on a solidified ticket, just because they did so tremendously when they worked together. Now, that being said, that's being ignorant of the issues. I don't know, but all I can say is that I have a lot of respect for Senator Durr. You know, he has arguably in his own right been a torchbearer for the party down South Jersey, and beating Steve Sweeney was no small feat. And Assemblywoman Beth Sawyer is, again, in her own right, a rising star and a political might and a force. And so, you know, they both have my support. That being said, the ticket that Ed Durr has built, again, I know them well. And they are such good people. So, you know, you always, as a Republican, you want to see, you know, realignment and working together. I know that's not always the case, but I just don't have enough insights on the issues to comment on that.
One last question, right? So you mentioned that Republicans we need to work together, right? Democrats seem to work together pretty well, right? They're pretty solidified as a party. Why do you think, as Republicans, it's harder for Republicans to kind of coalesce?
Yeah, well, look, I think the grass is greener on the other side every time, right? I don't necessarily know that the Democrats all work nicely together. I think they just have more top-down control from their party leaders, right? The lines in New Jersey matter, and I think the Democrats have done an effective job of using the lines to control party folks. You know, we've seen a lot of progressive Democrats break away, right? That's why you had a contested primary for Senator Booker, because people felt that he abandoned Newark on the progressive Democrat side. That's why you have Charlie, boy, his last name escapes me, down in New Brunswick, who has been championing progressive rights and feeling like the you know, establishment Democrats have failed their progressive caucus for a long period of time. So, you know, I think in Republicans, as the minority party, you know, we haven't coalesced quite nicely as we should. Being the underdogs, we should be working together around a common enemy. But you know, that takes leadership, and we need stronger leadership among the Republican Party here in the state to coalesce the grassroots with the establishment to work towards the common cause, which is not even aligning against beating Democrats. It's convincing voters why our policies are better for them. Right? We can't go in with an angry approach, you know, and we can't go in just pounding our fists saying Democrats are evil. That neither approach is going to work. People need to know why they're voting for you. Why you, right? They're ready to put partisan politics aside. They don't care. They want to know what you're going to do for them. At the end of the day, Republicans need to bring back holding office as a public service. Now, I'm again across the board. I'd say most elected Republican officials do espouse that. You see those values in Senator Panaccio and Senator Testa. You see those values in Sheriff Gannon and Sheriff Golden. You see those values in so many of our elected leaders across the state. And obviously, I'm missing so many. Senator Orojo and Assemblyman DeMayo, so many of them. But until voters start to see Republicans as true public servants and what we're going to do for them, we aren't going to convince them to vote for us. So we do need to find common ground. We do need to align, but we need to align around causes, not just Democrats bad, Republicans good. Those talking points don't work.
I think those are very wise words, right? I think at the end of the day, it is mostly, well, not mostly, it's all about the issues and it's all about the people, right? I think those two things ought to trump everything else, right? People above party, people above politics, right? Rik Mehta, thank you so much for joining us today for this wide-ranging interview and catch-up. I'm going to throw up the website for your company once again, lactiga.com, right? For people that want to check it out, right? Lactiga, LACTIGA.com. And right here, you've got your handle at Rik Mehta _NJ. Is that for your Twitter or what?
Yeah, that's for my Twitter. And then it's just Rik Mehta for Instagram.
Okay, Rik Mehta. Thank you, Rik. Best of luck on your endeavors. And we'll be catching up with you soon. And hopefully, we'll be seeing you on the ballot sometime in the not so far future, okay?
I appreciate that, Ryan. Thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure.
All right. Thank you, Rik. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thanks for watching and listening to Real Talk with Ronnie. To watch and learn more about our show, including ways to contact us and how you can be a guest, go to realtalkronnie.com.